Welcome to Different Makes a Difference, where we discuss investment matters that matter to everyday investors. Join Odlum Brown's equity analysts as we examine pertinent topics in today's markets and look at things a little differently. Odlum Brown is an independent Canadian investment firm. We provide integrated wealth management solutions to help clients achieve their financial goals, and we've been doing so for over 100 years. Join us for some lessons we've learned along the way that can make a difference for the future.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. I'm Stephen Boland with Odlum Brown. It's the end of June. We're halfway through the year, and in a few days, it'll be Canada Day. Now, given all that's gone on, I suspect Canada Day will feel a little extra special to a lot of people this year. We certainly have a lot to be proud of as Canadians. We're friendly, peaceful, prosperous, and free. And we thought today it'd be fun to highlight that we have some pretty good businesses here in Canada too. Companies that began with humble roots, but have grown to become global champions. And with me today to discuss is Trevor Chang. Welcome, Trevor.
Thanks for having me again, Stephen.
Great to have you here. So Canada is certainly well known for commodities. We've got big oil and gas reserves, grain, potash, iron ore, coal. And there's certainly a lot of successful companies in those industries. But we also have some wonderful consumer-facing businesses, companies that you see all the time, but you might not realize just how big they are. One of those companies is Alimentation Couche-Tard. It was started in Quebec, and it's now one of the world's largest operators of convenience stores. And it's a company that Trevor knows quite well. So, Trevor, tell us a little bit more about Couche-Tard and where it came from.
Yeah, so Couche-Tard was founded by Alain Bouchard in 1980, and that's when he opened his first store. And the interesting thing about Couche-Tard is that since the very early days, he grew the company rapidly, buying other chains. Today, the company has 17,000 stores in about 29 countries, and they're in the process of buying 7-Eleven, so that number could very well continue to go up.
And tell us some of the brand names that fall under the Couche-Tard banner.
It's Circle K in most parts of the world. They kept the Couche-Tard brand in Quebec, and then in places like Denmark and Sweden, there's a brand called Ingo there as well.
I certainly see a lot of Circle Ks around, and the track record here is just incredible. Alain Bouchard and his co-founders started with one store in Laval, Quebec in 1980, as you mentioned, and they've grown it to be 17,000 today. So quite the accomplishment. And if they're trying to buy 7-Eleven, they're not done yet. So is Alain Bouchard or any of the founders, are they still involved today?
Yeah, they're very much so. But for most of it, it's really Alain Bouchard who's the main driving force. In a recent media event in Japan, Alain Bouchard was there personally trying to convince the 7-Eleven stakeholders to sell the company to Couche-Tard.
He's a very passionate businessman. He loves his company, and that's really nice to see. You mentioned that growth is driven by acquisitions. They're trying to buy 7-Eleven. You know, a lot of studies say that acquisitions destroy value more often than adding value. Now, Couche-Tard has certainly been a different story. Why have they been so successful with acquisitions?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you're right. Most companies destroy value when they make acquisitions. They're honestly terrible at it. We think Couche-Tard is the exception, and that's because they have a playbook that works. First, it's all about financial discipline. They never bet the farm. And, sometimes they might stretch financially for a big deal, but they always have a plan to get their balance sheet back in shape, and they do it quickly. Second, they're buying into a solid business. The convenience store isn't going anywhere. It survived for a century by constantly adapting. In the early days, it used to sell primarily dairy, and now you go to the convenience store for things like coffee, food, and car washes. So they're constantly evolving to stay relevant. Lastly, they're really good at just making the businesses they buy better. After buying a store, they introduce their loyalty programs, they optimize the stores to sell a little bit more, and they cut all the redundant corporate costs. All in all, they're just great operators, and they get the most amount of value out of every store.
So, how much more runway is there for Couche-Tard? They're already quite big.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. But the interesting thing is, despite having 17,000 stores, the opportunity ahead is still humongous. In the US, they only have 5% market share. And most of the market in the US is actually single store operators. So, mom and pops that own between 1 to 10 stores. In Japan, the top three convenience stores have over 90% market share. So, if the US market evolves to look like Japan over time, then there's a lot of consolidation ahead. Now, I know you're itching to share a great Canadian success story yourself and one that you cover, like Couche-Tard. It had humble beginnings, but has also grown to dominate globally. Tell us about CCL Industries.
Yeah, so thanks, Trevor. CCL, it's not a household name, but if you drink a Heineken beer or use Tide laundry detergent or collect those little Monopoly pieces at McDonald's, you're looking at labels that were produced by CCL. So the company was founded in Toronto in 1951 by Gordon Lang. It started with just 3 people and one production line that was packaging a fairly new technology at the time, which was aerosol cans. And today they've grown to have more than 200 plants in more than 40 countries. And they have several different business lines. They're one of the world's largest label makers, which we just referenced, with customers like Procter & Gamble and Unilever and Heineken. They also sell Avery branded labels that you might buy at Amazon or at Staples. And they make those security gates that make the beeping noise if you try to leave a store without paying. Now, one other business line they have, if you take a $20 bill out of your wallet, CCL makes that plasticky material that Canada, the UK, and Australia use for their money.
Oh, wow. Very interesting. Now, is the founding family still involved? It's the Lang family, right?
Yeah, it's the Lang family. Gordon, the founder, passed away some years ago, but the Lang family still owns about 15% of the stock, and they control the company through multiple voting shares. Donald, who's the founder's son, he's currently chairman, and Erin Lang, the next generation down, she sits on the board as well. Now, since we're talking Canadian pride here today, I thought an interesting side note, Stu Lang, who's been involved with CCL, he's actually won 5 Grey Cups with Edmonton in the Canadian Football League. So some multi-talent there. Now, the CEO, Jeff Martin, he's not part of the family, but he is a tremendous CEO, and he's been running CCL for more than 15 years. And this is a business that's run the right way with a long-term view and treating all stakeholders well. And the family control, the Lang involvement helps protect management from shareholders who might push the company into shorter-term thinking.
Now, like Couche-Tard, they've been really good at making acquisitions. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, they've generated a lot of value over time with acquisitions. They're very disciplined on price, so they're very careful not to overpay for what they buy, and they tend to improve the businesses that they buy. Now, they do acquire a lot of small companies, but that adds up to pretty decent growth. And occasionally they find a big acquisition, and they haven't been able to find a big deal for a number of years because there's some competitors out there that have bid up prices. But CCL will wait patiently, and if opportunity surfaces, they'll be there. And if times get bumpy, it'll actually potentially create more opportunity. So CCL, it's a really admirable company. It's generated a lot of value, but it's a name that a lot of people probably aren't that familiar with despite its great success. So I want to go back to you, Trevor, and a name that probably doesn't need nearly as much introduction. We all see it every day, but it's Dollarama. And Dollarama may not sound exciting, but his financials are outstanding, and owning the stock has been a home run. So tell us a little bit more of the backstory with Dollarama.
Yeah, so Dollarama was created by Larry Rossi in 1992 when he took over his grandfather's retail store chain and rebranded it into Dollarama. When he began, it was only a modest 20-store chain, and now it's grown to one that has over 1,600 stores. So a lot of growth over time. We all have this memory about what dollar stores used to be like, right? I remember when I was a kid, it was a little bit dark, disorganized, and it sold a bunch of random stuff. I remember it being more of a treasure hunt than an actual shopping trip. Larry had this vision of making it a more consistent experience, making sure the stores were well lit and having product that you know will be there every single time you go. Now, Larry retired back in 2018, and his son, Neil Rossi, runs it now, and he's honestly done a terrific job.
So still a family affair, and they have done a great job. I remember those other dollar stores that you mentioned, and I still see some around today, but Dollarama's experience is much better, and it helps them win in the consumer environment. What other advantages besides just a better experience does Dollarama have?
Yeah, they're hyper focused on providing value for customers. Management talks about the company being a price follower and maintaining its price gap with competitors. So, certainly, they want to help the consumer save money. Now, with the scale that they have, they'll be able to buy things cheaper and pass on those savings to customers. So, it's a win win both ways.
The scale is a big advantage. Does it also limit how much growth is ahead? There's already a lot of Dollaramas out there. How much more runway do they have for growth?
They're targeting to open about 600 new stores by 2034. Certainly, the opportunity to open new dollar stores in Canada is not like what it once was, so they're having to find more opportunities internationally.
So tell us about that international expansion.
In Latin America, they own a majority stake in a dollar store chain called Dollar City. It looks very similar to a Dollarama store that you see up here. What's exciting there, though, is that they're on the cusp of expanding into Mexico, which is a large market and has tremendous reward. In March, they also announced they're acquiring the Reject Shop in Australia, so another international market that they're expanding into. If they can do well in Mexico and Australia and maintain how well the existing stores are doing, I think the stock can do well for a long, long time.
It's interesting. I go to Australia a fair bit, and the last time I was there, and this was before Dollarama's acquisition, I actually poked my head into a Reject store. It caught my eye because I thought I might get a deal or two once I saw the name, but I didn't end up buying anything. And I remember not thinking much of the store. So there should be a big opportunity there for a good operator like Dollarama. Let's hit one other company that you cover, Trevor, which is First Service. And I was actually reading a little bit of the history of First Service. It started by a fellow in Ontario named Jay Hennick, and he started in 1972 with a $1,000 loan from his father, and he started a small swimming pool management company. And some years later, he started First Service, which has become North America's largest manager of residential properties like condo buildings. Tell us a little bit about why you like First Service.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love the First Service business. It's a high quality business like many of the companies that we talked about today. One of the things that people think about with First Service, they think it's a real estate company and real estate cyclical. But what First Service focuses on is essential property services, things that you can't really defer. Or if you do defer, you can't really defer for a long time. You need to, use those services. So these are things like property restoration, where if a kitchen ever has a grease fire, in that unfortunate circumstance, well, most likely you probably need to repair it quickly, especially if it's for a business. They also own an interesting business that's and also related to fire, like fire protection. So anytime a condo needs maintenance on some of their sprinklers, well, again, that's a business that First Service is involved in because they want to make sure that people are safe. You certainly want the sprinklers to be working when you need it. So First Service has about a 95% retention ratio on their property management business. That's really, really solid. And the recurring revenues are also like 90% plus. So again, just hallmarks of a quality business. They have all these characteristics, and that's generally why we like the company.
Is there a size and advantage now, and how profitable are they?
It's a tremendously profitable business. If you look at it on a kind of a return on equity basis, they're in the high teens, so very solid. Now, one of the interesting things with their property management business is that in markets like New York in the past, because they manage so many buildings, they're able to go to these utility companies and get all of these condo buildings a special deal on electricity that, they use to light the hallways and things like that. So there's definitely some benefits to their scale, and they've been using it to, have better services for their residents.
Interesting. I live in a condo, and First Service is the property manager there. So every once in a while, I get an email about something that they're doing in the building. Jay Hennick, he's the chairman of First Service. He's a legend. I talked earlier about building from a $1,000 loan. He's also involved in Colliers. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so as First Service was expanding, they bought a business called Colliers, which is a commercial real estate broker. And they bought, I think, 80% of the business in 2004. They've grown both companies together. At about 2015, they split up both businesses, and because they wanted both businesses to be able to focus on what they're best at. So Jay Hennick ended up going over to Colliers, and that business has also just made a tremendous amount of acquisitions. Right now, they're getting into the engineering space with sort of the engineering consulting. They've previously expanded in sort of the real estate investment side as well. So yeah, I mean, it's been doing really, really well. We covered Colliers at one point, but certainly I think prices got too high for us, and therefore we moved on. But both businesses are great.
So a real Canadian legend in the business industry. Back to First Service. Where to from here? They're already the largest residential property manager in North America. Where do they grow from here?
Yeah, the interesting thing about First Service is despite the fact that they have leading positions in all the markets that they operate in, they still have a very low market share. So in something like residential property management, which in my recollection is probably the highest market share, it's about 7%. I mean, there's still 93% that they can go after. So again, a tremendous opportunity ahead. And, I want to spend some time talking about this, but First Service has a really unique culture. They have a culture where it's highly decentralized. Employees are empowered to think like owners. They can make decisions quickly. They can respond to, customer needs quickly. And, that's part of the secret sauce that makes them so special over time.
Well, that's great, Trevor. I think we'll end it there. Thank you for being here today. There are some great success stories here in Canada. Couche-Tard, CCL, Dollarama, First Service, to name some others. Saputo began when Italian immigrants in Quebec started producing a tiny amount of cheese, and is now a top 10 global dairy company. Ritchie Brothers is the world's largest auctioneer of trucks and heavy equipment. It began in Kelowna, BC, when three brothers held a furniture auction to pay off some debt. And Lululemon started right here in Vancouver less than 30 years ago, and it's extended well beyond yoga, and it's in more than 25 countries today. As Canadians, we're not perfect, but in the business world and beyond, we have accomplished a lot over nearly 160 years as a country. We have a lot to be proud of. So happy Canada Day. Hope it's a little extra special this year, and we look forward to talking again soon.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Different Makes a Difference. Just as every individual is unique, so are your financial circumstances. Be sure to talk to your professional advisors for advice related specifically to you. Our podcast is for general information purposes for Canadians only. The views expressed are those of the presenters and may not reflect the opinions of Odlum Brown. Be sure to check out our full disclaimer and subscribe to the podcast at odlumbrown.com/differentmakesadifference. Odlum Brown is a member of the Canadian Investor Protection Fund.